The sky was the kind of gray that made everything feel a little heavier. The library garden, tucked behind the faded brick building, had become Jamal's sanctuary. At 25, he was used to people not seeing him for who he truly was. Most saw a tall black man with tattoos and assumed danger, laziness, or struggle. Few ever stopped to hear his poetry. That morning, Jamal sat on the wooden bench with his notebook in hand, earbuds dangling but silent. He wasn't writing. He was staring into the rustling trees, trying to find a word for the hollow that lived in his chest lately. He didn't notice her at first. Langston Hughes, the voice startled him. Soft, but with a sharp edge, like a schoolteacher who once wielded chalk like a sword. Jamal looked up. She stood with a cane in one hand and a book in the other. Thin, white hair tucked beneath a faded beret. Her coat looked older than him, but her eyes? They had life and sorrow. "Excuse me," he said. "Langston Hughes," she repeated, pointing to the open page on his lap. "The rhythm in your writing reminds me of his early work. The jazz in it, the ache." Jamal blinked. "You read my writing?" "I peeked," she said unapologetically. "I'm Evelyn, retired English teacher. I don't sneak into diaries, just admire good verse when I see it." He smiled faintly, unsure whether to laugh or pack up. No one ever just approached him like this, especially not a 70-year-old white woman. "You a poet too?" he asked, curious. She sat down beside him slowly, her joints cracking. "Used to be. Now I read more than I write. My hands are stiff, but my thoughts are wild." They sat in silence for a while. "What do you write about?" she asked after a moment. "Stuff people don't want to hear," Jamal muttered. "Growing up in places where sirens sing louder than lullabies. About how tired my mom was. How church felt like both hope and guilt. Sometimes I write about love, but I don't really know what that is yet." Evelyn nodded. "I taught for 40 years. I've read thousands of essays. Yours," she looked at him, eyes wet but sharp. "Yours carries weight." He looked down, cheeks warm. "Thanks." Evelyn shifted slightly. "My husband died 6 years ago. Stroke. Fast. I come here because, well, silence is easier to share with strangers." Jamal looked at her, really looked. Wrinkles deep as riverbeds carved into her brown-spotted skin. But she glowed in a way that grief sometimes leaves behind. A sacred kind of light. "My pops left before I was born," he said. "I guess that makes two of us, used to being alone." She chuckled. "Strange world, isn't it? Two lonely souls from different centuries, crossing paths in a garden." He grinned. "That sounds like a line from a novel." "Maybe we're writing one," she replied. A breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of old paper and blooming azaleas. Jamal, without realizing it, flipped to a blank page in his notebook. He wrote, "A bench shared, a silence cracked, two strangers stitched in the fabric of now." He glanced at her. "That okay?" Evelyn dabbed the corner of her eye. "It's more than okay, Jamal. It's honest." They talked for another hour. About literature, about jazz, about how the world rarely believes in what doesn't fit their frame. When they parted, Evelyn squeezed his hand. "Same time tomorrow?" Jamal hesitated, then nodded. As he walked away, he felt something shift. Not loudly, but gently, like the first crack of dawn before the sun speaks. The next morning, Jamal arrived 5 minutes early. He wore his cleanest hoodie, the one without ink stains on the cuffs. He had even picked up a paperback of Langston Hughes from a secondhand shop on the way. There was no logical reason for his excitement, just the warmth of being seen. Evelyn was already there, seated on the bench with a small thermos and 2 paper cups. When she saw him, her face lit up in a way that made Jamal's chest swell with something he hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. "I brought tea," she said cheerfully. "Chamomile. Don't ask me to make coffee. I've never trusted a bean that needs that much heat." Jamal laughed, sitting down beside her. "Chamomile's cool. Calms nerves, right?" "Yes. And hearts, if you let it." They poured tea and sipped in silence. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she handed him a cup. Her skin was pale, the veins a map of time, the knuckles swollen from arthritis. Jamal noticed, but said nothing. She caught his glance and gave a half smile. "They used to be lovely hands," she said quietly. "Played piano. Wrote poems. Held babies. Now they ache with every movement. Still look strong to me, Jamal offered. Like they've survived a whole war. She blinked, taken aback. That might be the most poetic compliment I've ever received. They both chuckled. Then, Jamal opened his notebook and passed it to her. Wrote this last night. Evelyn adjusted her glasses and read. She walks in echoes of forgotten songs, in lace-ribbon grief and moon-drenched thorns. I sit beside her, and time leans in. Age fades where the heart begins. She closed the notebook gently, resting her palm over the cover. You wrote that about me, she said, voice thin. I did. Jamal, she whispered, you have a rare gift. But more than that, you notice. Most people forget how to see. Jamal sipped his tea, unsure how to respond. He wanted to tell her that she reminded him of the grandmother he barely knew. That something about her felt like home, even though nothing in his life had ever really felt like that. Instead, he asked, why'd you become a teacher? Evelyn stared ahead for a moment. Because I wanted to open windows in people's minds. I taught mostly black and brown kids in Detroit in the 70s and 80s. Some of them hated me at first. Called me Miss White Guilt. One threw a chair once. Jamal chuckled. Bet he got an A eventually. He did, she smiled proudly. He sent me a wedding invitation 20 years later. Jamal paused. You ever been judged for it? You know, spending time in those schools. She turned to him, eyes sharp. Oh, endlessly. But judgment never once made me doubt my purpose. You'll learn that as you get older, the volume of the world matters less than the clarity of your own voice. They sat, sharing tea and truth. The library garden around them buzzed with distant school children and birdsong. But in that little corner, time folded. No teacher and student. No black and white. No old and young. Just two souls speaking the same language. As they stood to leave, Evelyn looked at him and said, you should come by my apartment sometime. I got old poetry books gathering dust and a record player that still works. Jamal hesitated. You sure? I mean, I'm not dead yet, Jamal, she smirked. And you're the first person in years who doesn't talk to me like I'm already gone. He nodded slowly. All right then, I'd like that. As they walked away, side by side, they didn't see the woman across the street who paused, staring. Nor did they hear the click of a phone camera capturing them. They were too busy making space for something the world couldn't yet name. It started with a look, a pause in conversation, a shift in tone, a drawn curtain. Jamal had grown up in a world where people whispered about him before they knew his name. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't alone in the line of fire. This time, someone he cared about stood beside him. Evelyn lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment in a quiet, mostly white retirement community on the outskirts of town. The kind of place with potlucks on Thursdays and lawn flamingos that never moved. She had lived there since her husband passed. The neighbors adored her, until Jamal began visiting. The first visit was innocent. He arrived in a clean hoodie and jeans, carrying a copy of Maya Angelou's Phenomenal Woman under one arm and a small bouquet of daisies he'd bought from a street vendor. Evelyn greeted him with open arms, led him to her dusty bookshelf, and played Billie Holiday on her record player. They read poetry aloud and argued, gently, about the meaning of grief and grace. But the moment Jamal stepped outside to leave, the air changed. A woman across the hall, Mrs. Dolan, stood frozen with her Yorkshire Terrier tucked beneath her arm. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. The next day, Evelyn received a call from her daughter, Margaret. Mom, who's this young man people are talking about? A neighbor said he's been visiting. Is everything all right? Evelyn sighed. Margaret, his name is Jamal. He's a poet. He's thoughtful, brilliant. We share tea and read together. You're 71, Mom. Thank you for the reminder, Evelyn said dryly. Margaret lowered her voice. People are going to think he's taking advantage of you. Or worse. Evelyn paused. You mean because he's black? That's not what I... Yes, it is, she said gently but firmly. And shame on you, Margaret. Meanwhile, on Jamal's side of town, the talk was more crude. You trying to be her nurse or her next of kin? A friend joked. Yo, you dating grandma now? Another laughed. She got money? Life insurance? Jamal forced a smile, but the words burned. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. And yet, The seed of doubt had been planted. Later that week, he skipped their usual meeting at the library bench. He told himself he was tired, that he needed a break. But really, he didn't want to see the look on her face when he admitted he was scared of what this was becoming, of how real it felt, and how wrong the world would think it was. Evelyn sat alone on the bench for nearly an hour. The wind had picked up, rustling the pages of the book she never opened. She kept glancing at the path he usually took to meet her, but Jamal never came. That night, she didn't cry. Instead, she walked to her desk, pulled out a sheet of old stationery, and began to write. Dear Jamal, when you reach a certain age, you stop worrying about the opinions of people who wouldn't come to your funeral. I don't know what frightened you more, what people said, or what we didn't. But please know this, I never asked to feel seen again. I thought that part of my life was over. But then you sat beside me on that bench, and for the first time in years, I felt like I still mattered. Come back when you're ready. I'll be waiting. Yours in verse. Evelyn. She folded the letter and slid it between the pages of a poetry book he had admired. Tomorrow, she would drop it off at the cafe where he worked part-time. Because love, however it begins, deserves a chance to be braver than fear. The cafe buzzed with morning chatter and the scent of burnt espresso. Jamal stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, faking smiles and pouring lattes for customers who barely looked him in the eye. He hadn't been himself for days. His notebook sat unopened in the locker room, untouched since the day he skipped the bench. He'd been avoiding Evelyn, avoiding her warmth, her wisdom, her eyes that saw too much. He told himself it was the whispers that made him hesitate, the accusations, the stares. But deep down, he knew it was something else, something harder to admit. Evelyn had awakened something real in him, and real things were vulnerable. Real things could be taken away. Late that afternoon, a young boy with thick glasses and a Spider-Man hoodie wandered into the cafe, followed by his father. The father handed Jamal a book and said, "This is for you." A woman asked me to drop it off. She said you'd know. Jamal froze. It was the collected poems of Gwendolyn Brooks. Inside, pressed like a fragile truth, was Evelyn's letter. He read it twice. He didn't cry. He just sat down in the back hallway, holding the book to his chest as if it contained oxygen. For a long time, he didn't move. He just breathed in her words like they were medicine for his shame. That evening, with the letters still folded in his pocket, he walked to the library. Evelyn wasn't there. The bench sat empty, bathed in fading sunlight. He sat down anyway, notebook in his lap. His pen trembled in his hand, but he wrote, "I ran from the only place I felt whole. I left your silence unheld. I feared the mirror you held up to me. But I see now, the only thing louder than judgment is absence." The next day passed, and the one after. No sign of her. On the third day, Jamal gathered his courage and went to her apartment. He brought lavender tea and his favorite Billie Holiday record. He knocked, heart pounding like it did during childhood beatings when he feared what came next. The door opened slowly. Evelyn stood there, wearing a long cream cardigan and reading glasses low on her nose. Her expression was unreadable. Jamal stepped forward, holding the tea out like an offering. "I got scared," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "I thought maybe I was dishonoring you, or taking something from you I had no right to." "You didn't take anything," she said. "You gave something I thought I'd never feel again." It stood like that for a long moment. No hugs, no grand declarations, just a truth exchange between two wounded souls. "I missed our silence," he whispered. "I missed your words," she said. Inside, the apartment felt the same. Stacks of books, a record spinning quietly, a half-finished puzzle on the dining table. Jamal noticed a photo of Evelyn and her late husband on the mantel. The man had kind eyes and a crooked tie. "He'd like you," she said, catching Jamal's gaze. "You think so? He was a music man. Always said poetry was music's cousin." Jamal smiled faintly. "Guess I'm part of the family then." They sat and drank tea, not talking much. There was no need to explain what had happened. The days apart had done their damage. But the fact that they both came back, that meant something stronger than words. That night, as Jamal left, Evelyn touched his arm. "Come back tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "Every day you'll have me. Outside, The wind stirred the trees gently, and for the first time in days, the world felt quiet again. The days that followed were softer. Jamal and Evelyn resumed their rhythm. Tea, poetry, music, silence. But something had changed. Their bond had thickened, like honey left in the sun. There was no need to name it, yet it colored everything. Even their silences had texture now. One afternoon, Evelyn arrived at the bench carrying a small box, carefully wrapped in brown twine. She sat beside Jamal and placed it on his lap. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it," she said, eyes twinkling. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were a dozen old letters, faded ink, delicate cursive, aged paper perfumed with time. "These," she explained, "are love letters. From my husband, Robert. Some I never answered. Some I never had the courage to send back. But I want you to read them." Jamal blinked. "Why me?" "Because," she said gently, "you remind me that love still speaks, even when the world stops listening." They sat together for hours that day as Jamal read aloud. Robert's words were rich with longing, filled with young passion and a kind of vulnerability Jamal rarely saw in men, especially not men who looked like him. "My Evelyn, the world feels heavy today, but then I remember your laugh like wind chimes in July, and suddenly I breathe again." At one point, Jamal stopped reading and wiped his eyes. "I've never seen love like this," he whispered. Evelyn turned to him. "You're seeing it now." He looked at her, really looked, at the way her lips trembled when she smiled, the way her eyes stayed wet when his voice softened, the way she touched her wedding ring, not as a keepsake, but as a memory still breathing. "You ever wish you had said more to him while he was alive?" Jamal asked. Evelyn nodded. "All the time. Grief is a room with no doors, Jamal. But writing is a window." Jamal reached into his backpack and pulled out his own letters. Unsent pages to his father. Angry, grieving, aching pages. He handed them to her. "You read mine." "Fair trade." She opened the first page and gasped softly. "To the man I never met. You left a silence in my mother, so loud it raised me. But every line I write, it's louder than your absence." Evelyn read in silence, hand over her chest. "Jamal," she said, voice cracking, "these aren't just letters. They're survival. You've turned pain into something holy." They read into dusk, two souls reaching backward through time. One trying to remember love, the other trying to understand loss. The bench beneath them held years of heartbreak, healing, and hope. The next morning, Jamal found an envelope waiting at the cafe counter, addressed to him in the same neat script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Dear Jamal, I never knew the world would send me a second great love at 70. I know people won't understand. I know they'll call it foolish, shameful, unnatural. But they didn't see us. They never will. And that's okay. Love has never been something for them to name. Thank you for reading my past and writing me a future. Yours, if only in the in-between. Evelyn." Jamal folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. He sat down at the cafe table and began to write again. Not poems this time, but a dedication. "To Evelyn, whose hands taught me that love does not rust with age. And to Robert, who showed me that true love leaves echoes for strangers to find." The invitation came in the form of a post-it note Evelyn handed Jamal with a smile. "Sunday, 10 a.m., St. Martin's Episcopal. You're sitting next to me. No excuses." Jamal stared at it like it was a summons. "You sure about this?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "If they love me like they say, they'll learn to love the people I love." He didn't ask what she meant by that, but his heart kicked harder than he cared to admit. Sunday came. Jamal dressed in his best, black slacks, a pressed white shirt, and the charcoal blazer his mother bought him for his college graduation ceremony, the one he never attended. As he approached the church, he saw Evelyn waiting outside under a blossoming dogwood tree, holding a hymnal in one hand and wearing a soft lavender hat. "You look sharp," she said, her voice warm. "You sure they won't throw me out?" "They'll try," she joked, "but I'm too old to let them." Inside, the pews smelled of wood polish and decades of perfume. Eyes turned as the two entered. Evelyn moved with grace, her cane tapping with certainty. Jamal kept his head up, shoulders squared, pretending not to feel the heat of judgment burning into his back. They sat in the third pew from the front. The choir sang. The preacher preached. The gospel rolled through stained glass and settled over bowed heads. But beneath the scripture and the sacred, Jamal felt the stares, sharp and murmuring, like invisible thorns brushing against his skin. After communion, a little girl in the pew behind them tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, is that Evelyn's helper?" The mother shushed her quickly, shooting a side glance at Jamal. Evelyn turned. "No, sweetheart. He's my friend." Jamal's chest tightened. Her voice had been calm, but firm. He wondered if she felt the same electric pulse of tension that shot through the air. After the service, they made their way to the fellowship hall for refreshments. It was quiet, too quiet. The usual potluck energy was dampened by the polite discomfort hanging like fog. Mrs. Harmon, an old choir director with a high collar and tighter opinions, approached with a forced smile. "Evelyn, dear, so lovely to see you. And this is Jamal," Evelyn said brightly, "a poet, and my companion in tea and truth." Mrs. Harmon's smile froze. "Oh, how refreshing." Jamal extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." She shook it hesitantly, her grip soft like tissue. After a few more strained greetings, Evelyn took Jamal's arm and led him outside. They sat on the church steps, the stone cool beneath them. "Well," she said, "that was about as warm as an ice bath." Jamal chuckled bitterly. "I'm used to it." "I'm not," she said. "Not anymore. And I refuse to be." He looked at her, stunned by her defiance. "They want me to be lonely and respectable," she said, eyes blazing. "To play bridge, sip tea alone, and die quietly. But I won't. I've danced to too many songs and buried too many people to live according to their shrinking hearts." Jamal swallowed hard. "I don't want to be the reason you lose them." "You're not," she replied. "They never truly saw me." "You do." That night, Jamal wrote a poem and posted it on his small blog. "They don't see us. A boy, a widow. Black skin, white hair. Love, not lust. Grace, not scandal. Let them whisper. We'll speak louder in our silence." It was shared hundreds of times. Some praised it. Others mocked. But Jamal didn't care anymore. Because for once in his life, the most beautiful woman in the world had defended him in a church full of tight-lipped tradition. And in that defiance, he felt holy. It was a Thursday evening when Jamal finally brought Evelyn to meet his mother. He hadn't planned it. It just happened. Evelyn had cooked a pot of spicy lentil soup. Her arthritis had been acting up, and Jamal came over to help her stir. And before he knew it, he blurted, "You should meet my mom. She's been asking." Evelyn blinked, spoon midair. "Are you sure?" He hesitated. "No, but I'm tired of pretending you're just part of my afternoon walks." She smiled softly. "All right then." His mother's home was in South Oak, a modest neighborhood that carried the weight of generations. The paint on the porch was peeling, but the flowers in the windowsill were fresh. His mother, Denise, had always believed beauty was a choice. When they arrived, Jamal knocked once and let himself in. "Mom," he called. She appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was in her early 50s but looked older. Years of working double shifts and carrying heartbreak will do that to a woman. She froze when she saw Evelyn. Jamal stepped forward. "Mom, this is Evelyn." "Evelyn, my mom, Denise." There was a long, aching pause, the kind of silence that feels like a room inhaling. Evelyn extended her hand. "It's lovely to finally meet you." Denise looked her over, eyes sharp, unreadable. She reached out slowly, shook her hand, and said, "You want tea?" "Yes, thank you," Evelyn replied gently. The next 30 minutes were awkward. They sat around the worn kitchen table while Denise prepared tea with hands that trembled just slightly. She didn't ask questions, didn't smile, just observed. Jamal tried to fill the silence with small talk. His latest poem, the cafe's broken espresso machine, the raccoon that kept digging through Evelyn's trash. But his mother remained quiet, offering a few short nods, eyes darting between them. Finally, after Evelyn had excused herself to use the bathroom, Denise spoke. "She seems nice," she said, not quite convincingly. "She is," Jamal replied. "She's white," Denise said. Jamal nodded. I know, and old enough to be your grandmother. He sighed. I know that too. Denise leaned forward, folding her hands. Jamal, you know what people are saying? Yes, Mama. I know. I've heard it all. She stared at him. Then why? He looked down, gathering the courage she had taught him as a boy. Because, he said quietly, she listens to me. She doesn't try to fix me. She doesn't flinch when I'm angry or sad or broken. She sees me, not as some lost young man or a charity case, but as a whole human being. Denise exhaled long and slow. You think I didn't see you? No, he said, softer now. But I think you were too tired to. That cut deeper than either of them expected. Denise looked away, jaw trembling. He reached for her hand. I'm not replacing you, Mama. I'm finding pieces of myself I didn't know I'd buried. Just then, Evelyn returned to the room. Denise stood up. Thank you for coming, she said, not warmly, but not coldly either. Evelyn nodded. Thank you for the tea. They left shortly after. The ride back was quiet until Jamal finally said, sorry about that. Evelyn shook her head. Don't be. That wasn't disapproval. That was fear. Of what? Of losing you to something she doesn't understand. You're her only son, and I'm not what she pictured. Jamal rested his head against the window. I don't even know what I pictured. Evelyn reached over and touched his hand. That's the beauty of it, Jamal. Real love isn't what we picture. It's what survives when the picture fades. And in the dim glow of passing streetlights, their hands stayed clasped. Quiet, steady, and unashamed. Jamal arrived with a cake from a local bakery and a second-hand vinyl tucked under his arm. He had saved for a week just to buy the record. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, still wrapped in faded plastic. It wasn't her favorite artist, but something about the way Evelyn spoke about soul music made him want to give her something timeless. It was her 71st birthday. When she opened the door, she was wearing a deep green sweater dress and pearl earrings that shimmered like they'd once heard laughter from another decade. Her lips curled into a soft smile. You remembered, she said. I'd forget my own name before I forgot your birthday. He replied, holding up the record like a trophy. Thought you might like to dance. Evelyn let out a light, surprised laugh. Jamal, if I fall, we're both going down. Then we fall together, he said, stepping inside. The apartment smelled like rosemary and cinnamon. She had cooked, again. Roasted vegetables, lemon chicken, cornbread. The table was set for two. He noticed a photo of Robert on the wall was draped with a small scarf, as if acknowledging the occasion. They ate slowly, talking about nothing and everything. Old radio shows, bad dates, favorite sandwiches. When the food was gone and the plates cleared, Jamal reached for the record. You ready? Evelyn hesitated. It's been years since I danced. He smiled. It's just movement with a heartbeat. He placed the needle on the vinyl, and the room filled with warm static, then the soft croon of Marvin's voice. Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Jamal extended his hand. She placed her hand in his. Their fingers interlaced, young skin and old bones. Fragile but firm. They moved slowly at first, barely swaying. Evelyn's body was stiff, but Jamal's hand on the small of her back kept her steady. She closed her eyes and leaned in, letting the rhythm carry her. And then, just for a moment, time stepped back. No wrinkles, no aching knees, no judgments, just two souls orbiting each other in a living room small enough to contain the entire universe. Evelyn's cheek brushed his collarbone. I haven't danced since Robert's funeral, she whispered. Jamal tightened his hold slightly. You don't have to talk about it. I want to, she said. He had a stroke while shaving. I found him slumped over the sink, blood from a nick on his chin dripping like a final goodbye. Jamal didn't respond. He just let her rest against him, let her sway into the grief, let her remember. I thought that was it, she continued. The last chapter. I had my great love. I had my grief. I didn't believe in more. And then you showed up. Jamal leaned back and looked in her eyes. And I started to believe again. They stopped moving. He cupped her face gently. His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. I don't know what this is, he said, but it's the only thing that makes me feel like I'm not surviving. I'm living. Their foreheads touched, their noses nearly brushed. Then they almost kissed. But Evelyn stepped back, blinking fast. "Not tonight," she whispered. "Not because I don't want to, but because I don't want to rush something sacred." Jamal nodded. "I get it." The record kept spinning, the needle looping the final groove in a gentle hiss. Evelyn sat on the couch, breathless. Jamal joined her, his hand finding hers once more. "I don't care what they call this," he said. "Neither do I," she replied. Outside, the city moved. Horns honked, tires rolled, people shouted. But in that room, two unlikely hearts had found their rhythm. And for once, the world outside could wait. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Jamal had offered to take Evelyn grocery shopping that morning. "You always feed me like royalty," he teased. "The least I can do is help you hunt tomatoes and toilet paper." Evelyn laughed and waved him off, but agreed. She liked the way he offered help, not as an obligation, but like an invitation to be close. At Fairview Market, a small neighborhood store tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, they moved through the aisles like clockwork. Evelyn leaned on her cart while Jamal pushed it, tossing in canned soup, a new jar of cinnamon, and her favorite mint tea. They bickered about brands like an old married couple. "Generic cereal is just as good," Jamal insisted. "You're young and poor. Of course you think that," Evelyn shot back. She turned into aisle 7, looking for brown rice when it happened. She stopped, blinked, and reached for the shelf. Her hand trembled. "Evelyn?" Jamal asked, suddenly alert. She clutched the handle of the cart, her knuckles white. Her chest rose sharply, too sharply. Her face paled. "Evelyn," Jamal repeated, stepping closer. "What's wrong?" I can't breathe." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Panic sliced through Jamal's chest. He grabbed her gently. Sit down right here." He lowered her to the floor, cradling her against the side of the shelf while a few startled shoppers looked on. "Call an ambulance," he barked to a passing man. He turned back to Evelyn. Her lips were slightly blue now. "Stay with me, okay? Look at me. Just keep looking at me." She blinked slowly. Don't let me die in a rice aisle," she tried to joke, but her voice cracked. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "You still owe me 20 more arguments and a dance to Stevie Wonder." Within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the market noise. EMTs rushed in. Jamal stepped back, hands shaking, as they worked on her oxygen mask, blood pressure cuff, questions he couldn't answer. "Are you family?" one of the medics asked. Jamal hesitated. I'm her friend. I live close." The medic nodded. "You can ride with us." He climbed into the ambulance, never letting go of her hand. She squeezed back faintly, just enough to let him know she was still there. The hospital waiting room was too white, too quiet, too cold. Jamal sat in a chair too small for his fear. Time didn't move. He texted his mother, then deleted the message. He tried to write a poem, but the words wouldn't come. After an hour, a doctor emerged. "She had a mild cardiac episode," the doctor explained. "She's stable, but we're keeping her overnight for observation." Relief nearly knocked Jamal to the ground. He was allowed in later that evening. Evelyn was propped up in bed, eyes closed, Line dangling from her arm. Her hair looked thinner, her skin fragile. But when she opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled. "You stayed." "Of course I did. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." There was a pause. "I got scared," she admitted. "Not of dying. I made peace with that. I was scared you'd see me like this and walk away. That you'd realize how fragile I really am." Jamal moved to the edge of the bed and gently took her hand. "Evelyn," he said, voice steady, "you've been holding the pieces of my heart since I met you. You don't have to be strong all the time. Let me carry you for a bit." Tears slipped down her cheeks, unashamed. And as she drifted to sleep, Jamal sat by her side, watching the monitors beep and blink, silently promising her, and himself, that this bond, however misunderstood, was real, and it was worth fighting for. By the time Evelyn was discharged, her small world had changed again. She returned home with Jamal's help, moving slower now, but with defiant grace. He had rearranged her living room, so she wouldn't have to bend for books or strain to reach the teapot. She didn't protest. This time, she let him care for her without guilt. A week later, a knock came at the door. Jamal answered it. A woman stood there, holding a camera and a notepad. She wore large sunglasses and a smile that was too practiced. "Hi, sorry to bother you," she chirped. "I'm Angela from a Morning Citizen. We've gotten word about a rather unconventional friendship making waves in town." Jamal stiffened. "Not interested." The woman leaned forward slightly. "We're not here to judge. We just think it's a compelling story. Age, race, healing. There's been talk. People are curious." Evelyn appeared behind him in her housecoat, leaning on the doorframe. "If people are curious," she said coolly, "they can read a book." The woman paused, then smirked. "You'd be surprised how many people read blogs over books these days." That night, the story went live. The Odd Pair of Fairview. A widow's new flame? She's 71. He's 25. She's white. He's black. In a world obsessed with lines, they've crossed everyone. Some call it companionship. Others raise eyebrows. But no matter what you think, Evelyn and Jamal are rewriting the rules, one cup of tea at a time. Photos from Evelyn's Facebook, one she hadn't posted publicly, were included. A shot of them walking in the park. Another of Jamal pushing her grocery cart. The bench at the library. Within hours, the post had been shared over 4,000 times. The comments came in waves. "This is beautiful. Love has no age. She's robbing the cradle. Bet she's paying his rent. My grandma better not." They're both brave as hell. Evelyn shut her laptop after 10 minutes. "Fame," she muttered, "is a circus for people who never asked to be in it." Jamal, however, sat at the edge of her couch, fists clenched. "I should have stopped her. I should have told her to go." "You did," Evelyn reminded him. He looked at her, his voice trembling. "I don't want you dragged through this." She smiled, brushing a hand through his curls. "Jamal, I lived through the civil rights movement. I've been cursed at for walking arm in arm with black children. I've been called worse for doing less. Let them talk. We've already won." Still, the attention didn't die down. More bloggers picked it up. A local talk show host used them as a light-hearted controversy to end a segment on race relations. Paparazzi didn't flood their door, but judgment came in quieter ways. Longer stares in the store, whispers behind their backs, church invitations withdrawn. But there were messages, too. Direct messages. Emails. Letters. A young woman in Tennessee wrote, "I haven't spoken to my grandmother in 4 years. But after reading your story, I called her. We talked for 2 hours." A man from Chicago sent Jamal a message. "I'm 23. My best friend is 74. No one gets it, but you do." Moved by the messages, Jamal did what he knew best. He wrote. He posted a poem titled, "They Named Us What They Could Not Understand." Asterisk, we are not scandal. We are not shame. We are not a mother's fear, or a blog's clickbait. We are soft bread and morning tea. A bench, a book, a laugh shared between decades. If that unsettles you, perhaps it's your heart that needs to grow older. Asterisk. The poem went viral. For every insult, 100 found healing in their words. Late one evening, as Evelyn lay back in her recliner, Jamal knelt beside her and whispered, "What do you want the world to know, Evelyn?" She looked at him, tired, tender, eternal. "That I was loved, fully, unexpectedly, and fearlessly." He kissed her hand, and the world, watching behind screens and glass walls, could never name what they had. But they didn't need it to. The sun broke through the clouds, as if it had been waiting for them. Jamal spread the blanket over the soft grass at Merrifield Park, the same spot he and Evelyn had visited months ago during their earliest walks. Back then, it was just a quiet place to escape the stares and questions. Today, it felt like sacred ground. Evelyn wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and oversized sunglasses, her cheeks still pale from the hospital stay, but her spirit flickered with quiet energy. She moved carefully, with her cane in one hand and Jamal's arm in the other. The breeze tugged playfully at her scarf. They sat in silence for a while, enjoying the distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, the easy rhythm of spring. "I used to come here with my late husband," Evelyn murmured. "He was a Sunday kind of man. Calm, dependable. He never liked crowds either." Jamal smiled, peeling the lid off a Tupperware container. "This one's a peanut butter and banana sandwich, just like you taught me." She chuckled. "You're learning." As they ate, she leaned back and looked up at the sky. "I never imagined my last years would be filled with so much life." Jamal turned to her. "Your years aren't ending, Evelyn. You still have pages to write. She reached for his hand. Maybe, but even if I don't, I'm content. You gave me something most people never get, no matter how long they live. What's that? She looked at him deeply. To be seen. Really seen. Jamal's throat tightened. He thought about all the days he'd walked past people who looked like Evelyn, gray-haired, small, invisible in the rush of youth and noise. He never imagined that one day, one of them would become his heart's anchor. Across the park, a few people stopped and stared. Some pointed discreetly. A woman whispered something to her friend, both glancing again. Evelyn noticed, but didn't flinch. Let them stare, she said softly. Every time they look, it's a mirror they're afraid of. Because somewhere inside, they know love has no borders. And they're terrified of what that means for everything they've been taught. Jamal nodded. You always did know how to drop wisdom like breadcrumbs. She grinned. It's the age. Comes with free sarcasm too. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Jamal stood and reached out his hand. Dance with me. In the middle of the park? Yes. Evelyn hesitated, then slowly rose, leaning on him for support. Together, they swayed to the music only they could hear. A boy nearby pointed and asked his father, "Why is that young man dancing with that grandma?" The father watched for a moment, then said, "Because sometimes the world gives us love in unexpected shapes, and the wise ones don't argue with it." They danced until the breeze grew cold and the sky turned lavender. Back at the house that night, Evelyn took her medications, slipped into bed, and whispered, "If I don't wake up one day, I want you to keep dancing. Promise me that." Jamal bent over and kissed her forehead. "You'll wake up, but I promise." Outside, the stars flickered like quiet applause. Inside, two hearts beat in perfect, defiant rhythm. The call came at 6:47 a.m. Jamal had just finished a sunrise run, his hoodie soaked, music still playing in one earbud. His phone buzzed in his pocket. St. Francis Memorial Hospital lit up on the screen. His stomach dropped. He didn't answer right away. Something inside him already knew. "Mr. Adebayo?" the voice on the line asked. "Yes," he replied, his throat dry. "This is Nurse Karen from St. Francis. Evelyn Thompson was brought in early this morning by ambulance. She passed peacefully in her sleep shortly after arriving." The world blurred. Jamal sat down on a nearby bench, head in his hands, unable to speak. The wind had never felt so still. "Did she say anything?" he asked, barely above a whisper. There was a pause. She had a note in her pocket, addressed to you. He arrived at the hospital trembling, tears drying on his face only to be replaced again and again. They handed him a small white envelope with his name on it, written in Evelyn's sharp, elegant cursive. He opened it slowly. "My dearest Jamal, if you're reading this, then the sun has risen without me. But don't let your heart break for too long. I had more life in my last year with you than I ever did in decades before. Thank you for making an old woman feel beautiful, desired, challenged, and, most of all, loved. I used to believe that growing old meant fading into the background. But you brought me back into color. You made me laugh again. You made me dance again. Please don't mourn me too long. Instead, right? Speak. Love boldly. Live in ways that confuse small minds. And every now and then, eat a sandwich with too much peanut butter and think of me. Love always. Evelyn." Jamal wept openly. Not from regret, but from gratitude. A month later, Jamal stood behind a small wooden podium in a crowded community hall. A framed photo of Evelyn sat beside him. Her in her garden, arms crossed, that familiar spark in her eyes. "I wasn't Evelyn's grandson," he said. "I wasn't her caretaker. I wasn't her secret lover. I was just someone who saw her. And she saw me." He paused. We were different colors, different generations, and the world had a lot to say about it. But you know what the world forgot? He looked up. That love is not defined by age or race or blood. It's defined by soul. And Evelyn had the kind of soul that made you better just by being near it. The crowd fell silent. Some wept quietly. Others nodded. Jamal closed his eulogy with a poem, her favorite, then sat, eyes closed, hands still clutching the letter. In a world quick to judge and slow to understand, Evelyn and Jamal's story reminds us of a deeper truth. that the heart doesn't care about age, skin, or scandal. It only knows who makes it feel at home. So love boldly, live truthfully, and dance in the park when no one else dares. Because sometimes the most radical thing we can do is love without apology.